Well, Jessie, I've been here almost a year now, and I'm just getting to the place where I can safely say, I think I know Lutheran Memorial Church. But how long have you been around Lutheran Memorial, and how did you get here, by the way?
Well, I never can remember whether I joined in 38 or 39. So that gives you an idea how long I've been around. And I got here principally because when I finished college, my parents had moved to Madison, so I came to Madison. And they lived at that time at 536 West Johnson, which was a residential area. And this was a close-by church. And I could walk over here. And after having been to that was when Dr. Edwin Mall was here.
Oh, yeah.
And I started to sing in the choir and the music, and I just never left.
So you've been singing in the choir for, what, 41 years?
About 50.
50?
50, a little over 50. Although there was a 4-year gap there when, during the war, when I was gone.
What were you doing during the war?
Well, I was married and lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. Red was stationed at the Lincoln Army Air Base there. And I worked for the federal government while I was in Lincoln. We didn't have any children. And very nearly stayed in Lincoln because it was so very much like Madison, a university town, a state capital.
Yeah. Over that period of time, you've seen a lot of choir directors, I suspect. Tell me about some of the ones you remember. What were they like, and what do you remember about
Well,
them?
there haven't been too many because usually our choir directors are pretty long tenured. But when I first came, Professor Swinney from the university was the choir director. He was a very austere man. And I was, being at about 20 or 21, I was a little frightened of him. But nevertheless, then shortly after that, of course, Professor Paxton came. And he was here for many, many years. He and his wife, she played the organ and he directed the choir, and he was on the staff at the university in charge of choral music. And then we had an interim, Ernest Stanke, who is no longer with us, but was a choir director, music person in the public schools. And then, of course, Roger Petrick came, and he was here for a number of years, and each time it was a real opportunity to work with different people who had a different approach to music, and I was strictly an amateur musician, and I learned a lot from them. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, then came Bruce, and he's been here ever since, and that has been a real experience and a very, to me, a tremendous experience to work with someone like that.
What is it about Bruce that inspires you?
I think that Bruce, of all the choir directors, is the most truly devout Christian that I've come in contact with in the music world. It's so much a part of him. You know, it's not just a job.
And that shows through.
Oh, yes. And he's really taught us the way we should look at music and the way we should look at the lyrics and the words. And he brings our attention to the fact that, you know, you're not just singing notes. These are words, and these are powerful words.
That's great. You've met a lot of people over the years at Lutheran Memorial. Who are some of the people you remember, and how have they inspired you?
Oh, I've met a lot of people. I wouldn't know whether I should say. I remember them. Lutheran Memorial has always had some rather prominent people in the community, not only from the university but from the business community, and it's been a privilege to get to know them and to see them in a different context than in their everyday work, be it at the university or a bank or wherever it may be. And each of these people, as I've watched them, and they don't necessarily have to be prominent people in the community, but to watch them as they give of themselves to the congregation, use the expertise that they have for the benefit of the church and for the rest of the people in the church. And those, I think, have been role models through the years, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. This is a church that has all kinds of people. Some people are in families, some people are single, old people, young people, rich people, poor people. That's one of its great signs, I think, is it's very, very, very diverse. You had an interesting background. You were not what I would call a traditional family. You worked outside the home, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your occupation.
Well, I became involved in banking in 1949. And Red and I had come back to Madison in 1946. Bought a little home out in Fitchburg, which was completely rural at the time. And we had one child, daughter who had been born in Lincoln, Nebraska, Jean Ann. And by 1949, I had two children, a little girl approaching 4 and a little boy about 13 months, Bill. But I had a small home, and we had a financial need, and frankly, doing dishes and so forth didn't really inspire me. I had been in the business world long enough so that I knew there was something else in the world besides housework. So I prevailed upon my husband, and rather reluctantly, because at that time most women did not work outside of the home, that I would go out and see if I could get a job and work just long enough to pay off the mortgage, which I sincerely felt that that was what I was going to do when I started out. But I had the opportunity to go to work for this bank. Now, that was my first encounter with banking. My experience had been in other fields. When I got there, I found that it was a very, very interesting area of work. There was real opportunity for continuing education, and there was a tremendous opportunity to deal with people. And I liked people. And there was an opportunity to work with people within the organization and also the people on the outside, the customer. And I became very intrigued with banking. I began to follow a course of continuing education through the American Institute of Banking. And the longer I stayed, the more interesting I became, more interested I became. I realized that probably this was going to be a career for me. In the meantime, of course, I had the support of a very, very supportive husband and a marvelous neighbor, a friend of mine, who took care of my children just as well, or maybe even better than I could have. And the combination, I did have to take a little sabbatical for 6 months one time. Marilyn came along. That's our youngest daughter. And but I did go back to work, and I never left until I reached 65 and retirement age, when I retired from full-time banking. In the meantime, I had come through the ranks, and when I retired, I was vice president of a bank that I retired from. And since then, I've worked on a very flexible part-time basis in the area of bank operation, consulting, and audit. And I still do that.
You had a lot of different roles to play. You're a mother, a wife, a businesswoman, a civic leader. Let's go back over this. In what ways did your life in the church help you as a mother?
Well, I'm certain that it helped me to be compassionate, I think that the Christian religion, the Bible teaches you to love your family, take care of them, nourish them, give them the things that they need, and also some of the things that they want, but they may not need. And to be flexible, not only in dealing with your spouse, but with your children. And I could be criticized for this, but I often said to my children, you know, I didn't marry you, I married your father. and your father has certain rights, and there are going to be some times when you're not going to be able to do what you want to do because your father wants to do something else. And I said, he is the one who's going to win that argument. And I think that that's an important thing. I think sometimes you get a husband who feels they've been shunted to the side once the children come in the scene, and that they're no longer important. Well, to me, my husband was always important.
So your church helped you also as a wife?
Yes, yes, in my role as a wife.
And it must have been unusual when you went to work. I don't suspect you saw many women in positions like you were in. And did your church support you as a woman in the business world, or just as a person in the business world? Did you have a sense that your faith and your church were there with you in that?
Oh, very definitely. As I say, whether the church helped me in a supportive role, other than the fact that it made my life full and satisfying, because religion is a part of my life. And it fulfilled that role. The church, the people in the church.
Mm-hmm. I suspect you've watched Luther Memorial change a lot over all of these years since 1938 or 1939. What do you remember as some of the really glory days and the high points out of the past?
Oh my goodness, there are a lot of them. I think always the arrival of a new senior pastor is a very exciting time. I saw, of course, when I came here, Dr. Mao was here. When Dr. Pauls came, then Frank Eford, and then Steve Bramer, and now you. And each of them is an exciting time because you know that there are going to be some changes. You're dealing with a different personality. Each of those persons had special gifts, and they brought them to the church. And we, as members of the church, were the recipients of that. Mm-hmm. Those are exciting times. Of course, the weddings of a couple of my children. My own wedding, I was married here. I should say that was a highlight. Yeah. The baptism of our children, confirmation, the wonderful Christmas Eve services, Easter, the new organ. Those are all some of the special things that we did as a choir. For instance, when we did the creation, which was something that we practiced and practiced and practiced on, and it was very successful. Those are all highlights.
Yeah. I'm interested, I don't want you to dwell on this, but I'm interested, what do you think were some of the difficult times in the life of the congregation? Because, every organization has its ups and downs. And what would you characterize as the strength that pulled them out of the difficult times? What do you remember?
Well, when you think of difficult times, I think, for instance, the church, when it was trying to get itself out of debt, which it finally did, those were difficult times. And some of those times were before I was here at all. And I know them only by hearsay, but they were very real, and the people that were involved found it very traumatic. Then we came into the 60s, and it was a difficult time in the nation, a difficult time in Madison. Here we were right across from the campus. The campus was simply a boiling pot of negative reaction to the Vietnam War. The students were coming through that era of God is dead, he's gone, and the students just weren't coming. And but we held on and moved through that, and in the 70s they began to sift back in. And so, of course, in the 80s we found them really coming back into the church. I'm speaking now of the students. Mm-hmm. there have been the things that always rise in a church. Should we build this? Should we build that? Should we move the organ? My goodness, that was a big deal at that time. Later on, should we have a freestanding altar? And these things, each of them in a way threatened to really create a real schism in the church. But I found that through dialogue, an effort on the part of the pastor that was involved in, and members of the church council, and that to educate the congregation, to let them know all the facts, and gradually these transitions take place without causing a major split in the congregation. Mm-hmm. Some of them take time, patience. Sometimes there's a new idea comes along and you have to back off for a while and come back in. But the people basically here, my experience with all of them has been that they love this church and they're not going to let anything really ruin this church. And all of us make compromises or adjust maybe to what our original expectations were. But that's part of living. You do that no matter where you are, whether you're in the church or in your workplace or at home.
Yeah. You're talking about students, and of course that's a major factor. This church was organized originally as a campus ministry. How did relationships get worked out between Lutheran Memorial and the campus center? Or let me put it another way. What's been some of the benefit to Lutheran Memorial of having that campus center related to us?
Well, I think it did something for the general image of the Lutheran campus ministry to have a permanent home that was attractive in the right location, right next to a large church where many students do come, and have then a place for them to congregate by themselves. Lutheran Memorial was one of the early churches in a campus ministry type of setting when Pastor Blenker was here, and I was active in the Lutheran Student Association at that time, and we used to meet here. We met at Bethel, we met at Central Lutheran, which is no longer existent. We met at St. John's, and we'd move around from church to church on Sunday night. And 25-cent cost supper. But I think Lutheran Memorial, just by reason of its location and the beauty of the structure and so forth, it's always been sort of a gathering place for students.
Who are some of the campus pastors you remember as being important to you over the years?
Well, of course, Pastor Blenker, who was the original one. And then, of course, I was gone for a while. When I came back, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of probably the one, though, that sticks in my mind is Jerry Nockey, over such a long period of time, and such an enthusiastic campus pastor. Yeah. And also a member of Lutheran Memorial and playing an active role in the church here and with the campus ministry. Yeah. But there have been others. There have been Pastor Franson, and I can't recall all the names. Yeah. No, I'm thinking of that was an associate pastor. Jerome Bengtson was here for a long time. Ted Steggy. But those weren't campus pastors, they were associates.
Speaking of associate pastors, we now have a new one. How does she strike you?
I believe that she is going to fulfill a role that Lutheran Memorial had gradually moved toward, and that was that having a woman associate. And that was, again, something that had to be a gradual acceptance. And we were ready, and I think she's going to be a very, very fine addition to our...
How'd you like her first sermon?
I thought it was great. Yeah. Her voice is very clear and good. Now, I don't know whether, sometimes in the choir loft we have problems hearing the sermon, and particularly not so much that we don't hear the sound, but to hear the words. And I don't know whether it was some new equipment that had been put in or what, but her voice was very clear and easy to understand.
Good, good. Well, we'll get to hear her sing on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she'll be celebrating on Sunday.
Good, good.
Let's see, she's one of the new people that have come on here. We've had some other new people come on. What do you think about the idea of bringing on Jan Quello as the Director of Education? What do you think that will mean for us in the future?
I think this is going to mean some real emphasis in the area of youth and education by a professional. Not someone who worked and was very sincere in working, but it had to be something that was done as part-time and or an additional duty of the associate pastor, and with other duties becoming not the focal point of their work. Whereas now we have someone, this is the focal point. Mm-hmm. They give their entire attention to that, and we can't help but reap some benefits from that for our young people.
When you look down the road to the future, Jessie, what are some of your hopes for Luther Memorial?
I believe that Luther Memorial, I hope that it'll always be a real witness to Christianity in this setting. That it will be looked upon, which it is by many people, as more or less, and I know this is not the proper word anymore, but it's the cathedral church. People from many other faiths have a very positive image of Luther Memorial Church. And we know from our Easter and Christmas services that we have many, many, many non-Lutherans who are here every year and who wouldn't think of missing our services. It has established itself as that type of church. But we can also, I hope, be a positive force in Madison in taking making an increased emphasis on the social ministries, reaching out to the unchurched people, no matter where they are or who they are, and also never to cease serving the university community, because that was the original idea of this church being built here. Serving all of the people in our congregation and the community, not just our parishioners. Or again, I guess we've often discussed that makes a difference what you think is the parish of this church. Was it the entire city of Madison and the surrounding area? We know it isn't a neighborhood church. But we have a real opportunity here to serve. And as Christians, I guess that should be where our emphasis is.
You know the church beyond this congregation. I know you're on synodical committees. In the old Wisconsin Upper Michigan Synod, you were on committees. What do you see out there? What's the importance of the synod for you and the life of the church outside the congregation? Why do you keep doing that?
First of all, when I was asked to serve on the board of the old LCA, Wisconsin Upper Michigan Synod, to me this was a new area entirely. And I'm sure that my name was no doubt given to the Synod by Pastor Bramer. When they often do go to pastors and say, do you have someone in your area that you feel would be? And I never ceased to thank him for that, because what it did was take my rather tunnel vision, probably, of Luther Memorial and broaden it. And I certainly urge that anyone who is approached and asked to serve on a synodical or an ecumenical organization of any kind involving the church, that they should take that opportunity, because it is an education in itself. And it has continued to interest me, and to see what happens to those funds that we send on to the Synod, and then in turn goes on to the national church, and as a result of that reaches out throughout the entire world. And until you have served on some of those other bodies, there's a tendency to be concerned with the home church, and that's it. But this is the opportunity, this is the vehicle by which we as parishioners can not only support our own congregation, but also reach out to the people that are in need throughout the world. And
you know, Luther Memorial has a reputation for being a good supporter of benevolence.
right.
And I know you're proud of that. Tell me, what are the things about Luther Memorial about which you're most proud, that you hold your head up, and not in a false pride or a phony pride, but when you think I'm a member of Luther Memorial Church, what are you most proud of?
Well, there are a lot of things to be proud of at Luther Memorial. And as I've served, for instance, on the Wisconsin Conference of Churches, which is the ecumenical body in the state for the various judicatories, and we're talking about certain things that are of high interest, for instance, sexuality. I'm thinking of, the AIDS thing, that sort of thing, and they're talking about what should be done and what the churches should try to set up in programs and so forth. And frequently I'm able to sit there and as I say, with a sense of pride, say, we just had a marvelous experience at our church. We had a wonderful speaker in who talked about that particular subject. And then I've often heard John Fisher say, yes, but he says, Luther Memorial's always out there ahead of the rest of us. Now that doesn't make me feel bad, of course. And of course, the other thing that I'm always so proud of is its music program. We offer to the community a really fine music program and an opportunity for people that are interested in music, not only professionals but amateurs like myself, to take part.
We do a lot of work inside too. I can't help but think about Marcel. She in my book is kind of like our resident Mother Teresa. Talk a little bit about Marcel and her ministry. What do you think that means to the people at Luther Memorial?
Well, frankly, I don't know what we'd do without Marcel. She has, through the years, been that person that's out there on a daily basis and a personal reaching out to individuals on a one-on-one basis, which our pastors try to do, but oftentimes are unable to. There are only 24 hours in the day. But Marcel, in fact, those of us in the congregation who know Marcel know that you should never say to Marcel, we need this, or we should do this, because she's going to do it. She's going to pick up the ball and run with it. And I still can see her with a paintbrush in hand painting our bathrooms or something of that kind, If she decided it needed cleaning, she's going to clean it if it hasn't gotten clean. It's inside or outside of the church. She runs a taxi service, of course, bringing our elderly to the church, and I'm sure they're most appreciative of it.
Yeah. You're one of the few people that gets around here to see the background, behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of staff people work here in the office, running machines, all the rest, and you get to see them. What would you like the rest of the congregation to know about the staff around here?
Well, I'll tell you, this staff works and works and works. And I don't think unless you perhaps have volunteered in some way and therefore came in contact with that staff during the week and see the work that goes into putting that Sunday service together and people come to church. Unless you've been in there in that office, you don't realize the work And I've often said to the girls, I said, I wonder if the congregation realizes the blood, sweat, and tears that go into that Sunday morning service. And it's, while we have a paid staff, it's a combination of the paid staff and the wonderful volunteers, or we just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But to come and work in the church office or in the church during the week, you soon get that feel of, this place is busy. There's something going on all of the time. It's not just Sunday. That's the smallest part of it.
What is it, have you been present recently for, you probably haven't been here for the 8:15 service, have you?
No, I haven't.
So you haven't had a chance to see all the children come forward for the children's sermon?
No, but I've heard about it.
Well, we have, sometimes 40 and 50 kids come forward for a children's sermon.
That's wonderful.
Children are important here. One time we had, I told, 600 in the Sunday school, and it's growing again. It's growing again. How was it important to your children when they were growing up?
Well, it was part of their life, coming to Sunday school. And I can remember when our oldest little girl was about 3 or 4 years old, and she was in a Sunday school class, and it was in the basement of Pastor Paul's home, which was right next to the church. That's all. This was before the education wing was put on. That was the only place that there was. And some of the fondest memories I have is seeing Evie Walker running around in her choir robe, flying in the air, and she was the superintendent of the Sunday school for so many years, and we had all of those little dividers in the main assembly room downstairs so that we had classrooms. And that's when we had the greatest need for space, and it just wasn't here. Well, then, of course, when the church debt was paid off, and Dr. Pulse was here, and they went ahead and they decided to put on that education wing, and there was a time, again, when there are people in the congregation always who say, oh, that'll never work. We'll never be able to pay for it. But it was built and it was paid for. And then, after we had all that room and everything, then the demographics of the area changed and the child population began to go down, down, down. Now it's coming back, 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 and we have the space for them, which is wonderful. But it was a meaningful part of their life. We often, when we get together for family get-togethers, we often laugh about the times when Bill went over. He was about 4 years old. He's standing up in front and singing a song. Evidently he got a little bored, so he goes over and leans over on the pulpit and crosses one leg over the other and stands there. I thought, oh, I wonder if anybody knows he's mine. But those are the fun things that you remember.
That's sweet. Jessie, let's go back over. We were talking a little bit about this business of what it means to be a minister, and I put on the little back of the bulletin, ministers, the people of Lutheran Memorial Church. How does it strike you if somebody calls you a minister?
Well, first of all, after I got over the initial shock and decided what they really meant by that, I think one should be proud to be a minister. In our baptism, we become ministers. As we grow in our beliefs in the church, as we study, Luther said, we are all ministers. If I can be a minister, I feel that, and a ministerial role, I should be happy about that. I found that in dealing with people, and particularly in my career, I dealt with so many people internally, helped them along with their careers, helped them when they were down, pulled them out of the hole, so to speak. Not saying to myself, well, now I must be a minister, but that sort of thing, if you believe in it, it spills over into the way you treat people, whether it's your family, your children, your grandchildren, your friends, your husband. You treat them with concern and kindness. It doesn't mean that you cannot become angry over something. Ministers are human beings. And we have our weaknesses too. But I think that if you have a sincere Christian belief and have the opportunity to be part of a Christian community, such as Luther Memorial, and I see that people around me who are performing as ministers, each of them, not consciously perhaps, that it's an inspiration, and it does spill over into how you treat people.
Hey, Esther, come here a minute.
What?
It says right here on the listing of all the people active in the church that the ministers are the people of Lutheran Memorial. What the heck does that mean? Does that mean I gotta write a sermon and give it?
What do you mean? I've been listening to you preach at me for over 50 years.
I have not. You've done all the preaching. But you're no help. I'll get somebody at church. Say, Pastor, what does it mean here where it says that we're supposed to be ministers? I thought that was your job.
Well, I'll tell you, we were just working on this bulletin. I thought it was about time when we should say something about the fact that we're all ministers. We were all made ministers. No, you don't take my job, and I won't take yours, Sid. But I say, speaking of ministers, what do you know about that gal, Jessie Nelson, over there?
Well, I know she does a lot of work around here and is very active in the church, but that's about all I know.
Well, Jessie's had an interesting life. She was in banking for a while, so she's had a whole life outside here. Yeah. And I'll bet she thinks of that life as her ministry. Why don't we listen for that?
I never can remember whether I joined in 38 or 39. That was when Dr. Edwin Mall was here. And I started to sing in the choir and the music, and I just never left. By 1949, I had 2 children, a small home, and we had a financial need, and frankly, doing dishes and so forth didn't really inspire me. I had been in the business world long enough so that I knew there was something else in the world besides housework. And I liked people. And there was an opportunity to work with people within the organization and also the people on the outside, the customer. And when I retired, I was vice president of a bank that I retired from. Luther Memorial was one of the early churches in a campus ministry type of setting. I think Luther Memorial, just by reason of its location and the beauty of the structure and so forth, it's always been sort of a gathering place for students. Well, there are a lot of things to be proud of at Luther Memorial. We have a real opportunity here to serve. The baptism of our children, confirmation, the wonderful Christmas Eve services, Easter, the new organ, those are exciting times. When our oldest little girl was about 3 or 4 years old, and she was in a Sunday school class, and it was in the basement of Pastor Paul's home, which was right next to the church. That was the only place that there was. That's when we had the greatest need for space, and it just wasn't here. And the church debt was paid off, and Dr. Paul's was here, and they went ahead and they decided to put on that education wing. It was built and it was paid for. Now we have someone, this is the focal point. They give their entire attention to that. I think this is going to mean some real emphasis in the area of youth and education by a professional, and we can't help but reap some benefits from that for our young people. The arrival of a new senior pastor is a very exciting time. Each of them is an exciting time because you know that there are going to be some changes. You're dealing with a different personality. Each of those persons had special gifts and they brought them to the church. And we, as members of the church, were the recipients of that. Luther Memorial had gradually moved toward having a woman associate. That was, again, something that had to be a gradual acceptance. And we were ready, and I think she's going to be a very, very fine addition. I've often said, I wonder if the congregation realizes the blood, sweat, and tears that go into that Sunday morning service. While we have a paid staff, it's a combination of the paid staff and the wonderful volunteers, or we just couldn't do it. Come and work in the church office or in the church during the week, you soon get that feel of, this place is busy. There's something going on all of the time. It's not just Sunday. That's the smallest part of it. I don't know what we'd do without Marcelle. She has, through the years, been that person that's out there reaching out to individuals on a one-on-one basis. She runs a taxi service, of course, bringing our elderly to the church, and I'm sure they're most appreciative of it.
Yeah.
I think that Bruce is the most truly devout Christian that I've come in contact with in the music world. It's so much a part of him. You know, it's not just a job. He has really taught us the way we should look at music and the way we should look at the lyrics and the words. And he brings our attention to the fact that, you know, you're not just singing notes. These are words, and these are powerful words. I'll tell you, this staff works and works and works. I believe that Luther Memorial will be looked upon, which it is by many people, as more or less, and I know this is not the proper word anymore, but it's the cathedral church. We can also, I hope, be a positive force in Madison, making an increased emphasis on the social ministries, reaching out to the unchurched people, no matter where they are or who they are, and also never to cease serving the university community. We have a real opportunity here to serve. And as Christians, I guess that should be where our emphasis is. I certainly urge that anyone who is approached and asked to serve on a synodical or an ecumenical organization of any kind involving the church, that they should take that opportunity, because it is an education in itself. This is the opportunity, this is the vehicle by which we as parishioners can not only support our own congregation, but also reach out to the people that are in need throughout the world. Luther Memorial has always had some rather prominent people in the community. It's been a privilege to get to know them and to see them in a different context than in their everyday work. And each of these people, as I've watched them, they give of themselves to the congregation, use the expertise that they have for the benefit of the church and for the rest of the people in the church. They have been role models through the years. I think one should be proud to be a minister. In our baptism, we become ministers. As we grow in our beliefs in the church, as we study, Luther said, we are all ministers. If I can be a minister, I feel that, and a ministerial role, I should be happy about that. It spills over into the way you treat people. You treat them with concern and kindness. Doesn't mean that you cannot become angry over something. Ministers are human beings. And we have our weaknesses too. But I think that if you have a sincere Christian belief and have the opportunity to be part of a Christian community, such as Luther Memorial, and I see that people around me who are performing as ministers, each of them, not consciously perhaps, that it's an inspiration, and it does spill over into how you treat people. One should be proud to be a minister.